What would you do if your life was completely changed by a decision you never made? That question echoed in my mind as I watched the world crumble around me. My name is Lucas, and I am the son of a millionaire. Since I was little, life has been a path paved with expectations and obligations. However, everything changed when my father decided that I needed to marry a humble farmer before Christmas. The touch of such an unexpected outcome made me question everything I thought I knew about love, wealth, and happiness. The story takes place in the vast plains of Nebraska, where the cold of winter brings a blanket of snow that covers the land, but fails to hide the tensions that form. My life up to that point had been marked by lavish parties, fine dining, and the constant pressure of being the heir to an empire. At just 25, I had already experienced the oppression of success, but I never imagined myself trapped in a marriage arrangement. The sound of the piercing wind mixed with the echoes of laughter at home, a contrast that left me uneasy. As I walked around our property, I looked out over the fields where the farm of Sarah, the woman my father chose for me, stood. I had never met someone like her, someone who lived a simple life, far from the glitter and superficiality that surrounded me. My dream has always been to find a true purpose, something that allows me to feel like my life has meaning. But as the wedding date approached, I found myself caught between loyalty to my father and the desire to follow my own path. Interactions with my family members were tense and full of expectations. My mother, always concerned about keeping up appearances, insisted that I should accept what my father had decided. In conversation, she said, "Lucas, you know you can't disappoint your father. He did this for you to guarantee a future. But what would this future be if I didn't have room for my own choices?" That pressure left me suffocating. With each passing day, I grew closer to Sarah, even if reluctantly. She was a strong woman, full of dreams and determination. Upon meeting her, I realized there was so much more to her life than I could have ever imagined. In one of our conversations, she told me about her hopes of expanding the family's small farm, transforming the fields into a prosperous and welcoming place. His gaze shone with a passion I had long lost. "You don't have to be rich to be happy, Lucas," she told me once, and those words stuck in my mind, challenging everything I believed. The dilemma intensified. With each encounter, with each conversation, I felt my resistance melt away. Sarah didn't need me to rescue her life, but somehow I felt like she was rescuing me from the golden prison in which I lived. The idea of a forced marriage started to turn into something I couldn't ignore. The connection we were forming made me question the values that were imposed on me. What really mattered? My heart was divided between the expectation of a safe future and the promise of something authentic and real. As Christmas approached, the pressure increased. The snow covered the land like a sheet of silence, and I knew that inside me there was a storm of emotions. I needed to decide, follow the path my father set for me or risk everything for something that could be much more meaningful. Each day, interactions with Sarah showed me that true love would not be measured in riches, but in the ability to dream and fight for a future together. And so, the story unfolds. With each step, with each challenge, I found myself closer to discovering who I really was and maybe, just maybe, finding a love that could change not just my destiny, but that of everyone around me. What I didn't expect was that this journey would take me to a place of self-discovery and growth that I never imagined possible, and that the true meaning of Christmas could be much deeper than a simple social event. With each passing day, the tension in my home became more palpable. My father, a man of firm principles and vision of the future, seemed determined to push me towards this union with Sarah, completely ignoring my hesitations. His gaze, firm and determined, made me feel like I was in a corner with no way out. He didn't just see a marriage, he saw an opportunity to expand our legacy, an alliance that would unite our wealth with the simplicity of rural life. But I saw something much more complex, the struggle of a young man trying to understand his own path in a world that seemed decided for him. One night, while we were having dinner, the conversation took an unexpected turn. My mother, in her cautious way, asked about the wedding plans. "Lucas, have you thought about what you're going to say to Sarah? She must be so excited," she said, trying to ease the pressure. Her sentence sounded like a knife in my chest. I didn't want to disappoint her, but the idea of a future with someone I barely knew, just because of my father's wishes, was suffocating. "Yes, Mom, I'm thinking about it," I replied, trying to stay calm, but the truth was I felt lost. The table was full, but it was as if a deafening silence had fallen. My father, sensing the tension, decided to intervene. "Lucas, you can't hesitate. Life is made of decisions, and sometimes we need to give up our desires in favor of something bigger." His words resonated in the room, and I wondered if he truly believed what he was saying or if he was just trying to justify his imposition. That same week, I decided to visit Sarah again. I needed to understand who she really was, beyond what my father had told me. When I arrived at the farm, the atmosphere was welcoming. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven mixed with the aroma of the countryside. Sarah was in the kitchen, with a smile that lit up the room. We talked about everything and nothing, and the connection I felt with her grew with each word exchanged. "Lucas, you seem distant sometimes," she said, as she stirred the dough. "What is happening?" That question took me by surprise. I was so used to hiding my feelings, keeping up appearances, that I didn't know how to open my heart. "I'm just struggling with some decisions," I replied, hesitating. "My father expects a lot from me." She paused for a moment, looking deeply into my eyes. "Sometimes what others expect of us can make us forget who we really are." "What do you want, Lucas? What makes your heart beat faster?" His words were like a bucket of cold water, awakening something inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted her to know that she wasn't just a toy in my father's hands. But the truth is, I didn't know what I wanted. The pressure and expectations were suffocating me, and I felt like an outsider in my own life. In the following days, an internal battle began. At home, interactions with my parents became increasingly tense. My father insisted that I should start planning the wedding, while my mother, in her subtle way, tried to convince me to accept what was coming. In one particularly difficult conversation, she said, "Lucas, you cannot ignore the responsibility that comes with your name. This marriage could be the key to a bright future." But what would a bright future be if there was no room for my own choices? Doubt consumed me. I found myself in a vicious cycle of frustration and confusion. How could I be happy in a relationship based on obligations? What was stopping me from just saying no and going my own way? Each night, as I looked out the window at the starry sky, the feeling of being trapped became more intense. After a particularly difficult night, I decided to seek comfort from a childhood friend, Gabriel. He was always the opposite of me, free and unpretentious. We met at a local bar, and upon entering, I was greeted by the smell of whiskey and the sound of laughter. Gabriel was there, with a wide smile, and soon engaged me in a conversation. "Hey, Lucas, how are things in the world of the rich and famous?" He joked, but I knew he was worried. "You seem tense, my friend. What are you catching?" I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm about to get married, but I don't want that. I don't know how to deal with all of this," I confessed, my voice almost cracking. Gabriel looked at me seriously. "Then don't do it. You don't have to do something just because people expect it from you. Your life is yours. Don't let anyone define you for you." Those words echoed in my mind. He didn't know, but by telling me this, he gave me a new perspective. I needed courage to face my father and my fears. I needed to find my voice, even if it meant defying the expectations that weighed on me. With each word we exchanged, I felt the flame of determination light up inside me. I had to be honest, not just with others, but especially with myself. I decided it was time to act. Christmas was quickly approaching, and with it, my wedding date. I needed to face my father and explain how I felt. The internal struggle was far from over, but I was beginning to understand that true happiness came not from wealth, but from authenticity. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to discover what it truly meant to live rather than simply exist. Christmas was approaching, and with it, my wedding date, an event that hung like a dark cloud over my head. With each passing day, the weight of expectation on my shoulders became more unbearable. The idea of committing to Sarah, a young woman from the farm, was not just a matter of love or friendship, but an imposition that left me in a constant state of tension. What should have been a moment of celebration turned into a burden. My father, always so firm, didn't seem to notice the struggle that was going on inside me. He saw only a vision of a bright future while I saw an abyss. As soon as Christmas Day arrived, the house was adorned with lights and decorations, but joy seemed far away to me. The table was full of delicious dishes, but their taste became bitter in my mouth. During dinner, my father gave a speech extolling family values and the importance of unity. His words were like a chain that tied me to the past, while my heart cried out for freedom. When he mentioned Sarah, my stomach dropped. "Lucas, you will soon be building a new family," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. "I'm so proud of you." At that moment, I felt like a puppet, pulling the strings my father had strung out. My mother's hopeful look made me feel even guiltier. I didn't want to disappoint them, but the idea of going down this path was terrifying. After dinner, I decided to take a walk through the garden, looking for a moment of tranquility amidst the whirlwind of emotions. The biting cold made me feel alive, but the loneliness also became evident. The stars were shining in the sky, but I felt lost in a sea of uncertainty. The pressure was intense, and the doubt about what I really wanted continued to grow. It was then that, in the middle of my thoughts, I received a message from Gabriel. He wanted to find me. I knew I needed that conversation, but the idea of exposing my feelings made me nervous. When I arrived at our meeting point, he looked at me with concern. "Lucas, you look different. What is happening?" "I'm about to get married, but I don't want that. I don't know how to tell my parents that I can't follow this path," I confessed, my voice breaking. Gabriel listened to me attentively. "You have to be honest with yourself. If you don't want it, you can't do it out of obligation. Think about how you will feel in 5 years if you continue on this path." His words resonated in my mind like a distant echo of freedom. I needed courage, but the thought of disappointing my family was paralyzing. Over the next few days, I was overcome by a wave of uncertainty. My father's pressure continued to mount. He started talking about the ceremony, about the guests, and the expectations everyone had. His every word was a reminder of the prison I found myself in. My heart was beating fast, and I felt like I was sinking in a sea of obligations. One night, in a moment of desperation, I decided to go to Sarah's farm. I needed to understand how she felt, how she saw all of this. When I arrived, I realized I was nervous, but the sight of her calmed me down a little. We sat down at the table, and soon the conversation flowed. "Lucas, you seem distant. What is happening?" Sarah asked, her voice sweet and concerned. "I'm struggling with all of this. My dad expects so much from me, and I don't know if that's what I want," I replied, frustration showing in my voice. She looked at me with compassion. "You don't have to do this for them. You deserve to be happy, Lucas. Don't forget who you are." Those words penetrated deep into my soul. I wanted to be happy, but what did that mean? The internal struggle was increasing, and I wasn't sure how to get out of this situation. Doubt consumed me. As the days went by, I realized that the pressure was affecting not only me, but also my relationship with Gabriel. He was dealing with his own issues, and our conversations started to get more tense. He didn't understand the weight I was carrying, and at times, this turned into disagreements. "You should be grateful to have this opportunity, Lucas. Not everyone has that," he said in a moment of frustration. That hit me like a punch in the stomach. "It's not just that, Gabriel. I can't be stuck with something I don't want." I shouted, emotion overflowing. He fell silent, and the silence between us was deafening. The friendship that had always been an anchor became a minefield of unspoken emotions. Weeks passed, and the wedding date approached. I knew I needed to take action, but the fear of disappointing my parents and facing everyone's disapproval paralyzed me. The night before the wedding, I went to my room, surrounded by gifts and greeting cards. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger in my reflection. A young man who was about to take a step he didn't want to take. Tears streamed down my face as I wondered if I had the courage to change my destiny. I needed to face my father, but how could I do that? What would I say? Insecurity consumed me, but deep down, a small flame of hope was beginning to light. What I really wanted was the freedom to live my own life, and that was worth fighting for. That night, gathering courage, I decided that, the next morning, I would tell the truth. Whatever happened, it would be a step towards my own happiness. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a lump in my throat and a feeling of despair. The sun shone brightly, but the light could not penetrate the darkness that enveloped me. The silence in the house was deafening, and every step I took towards the bathroom seemed to echo like a warning that I was about to make an irreversible mistake. I looked in the mirror and saw a face marked by anguish. What I should have been feeling was happiness, but instead, a storm was brewing inside me. As I got dressed, the tie I put around my neck felt like a rope tying me to a destiny I didn't want. Everyone's expectations were heavy, like a suffocating blanket on my shoulders. The idea of disappointing my parents was a thought that accompanied me every second, but at the same time, the idea of walking into that church and saying yes to something I didn't want seemed even more unbearable. I remembered Gabriel's words, which echoed in my mind, "You deserve to be happy." But what was happiness for me? Was it following the path my father had set, or having the courage to pursue what I really wanted? The truth is, I didn't know. Time passed, and the anxiety grew, as if each minute that passed was a reminder of what was about to happen. When I finally arrived at the church, the sound of the music and the laughter of the guests hit me like a blow. They were there, all waiting for me, with smiles on their faces and hope in their eyes. And in that moment, I realized that what I feared most was not just their disapproval, but my own disapproval. I was about to lose the chance to be true to who I really was. When the doors opened and I walked in, the crowd's gaze turned to me. My heart raced, and I could almost feel the weight of expectations piling up in my chest. Sarah was there, beautiful, with a radiant smile, but still, a part of me felt a deep pain. What I saw was her joy, and that only increased my despair. What I was about to do wasn't just a choice, it was a decision that would affect our lives forever. With every step I took toward the altar, the pressure increased. With each congratulations I heard, with each look of approval, with each whisper of happiness, my heart tightened more. When I finally arrived at the altar, I looked at my father. He seemed so proud, so sure he was doing what was best for me. His gaze cut me like a knife. I didn't want to disappoint him, but at the same time, I didn't want to live a lie. The celebrant began to speak, and his words sounded distant. I couldn't concentrate. In the back of my mind, a battle was raging. It was as if two voices were screaming, one asking me to move on, to do my duty, and the other begging me to stop, to tell the truth. The tension was unbearable, and suddenly everything crystallized in a single moment. When it came time to say yes, a rush of adrenaline washed over me. I looked at Sarah, and her image made me realize that what I was about to decide didn't just affect me. The weight of this responsibility hit me hard. And, in a moment of clarity, I realized I couldn't move forward. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to me, confused, surprised. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine. "I'm sorry, I can't go through with this. It's not what I want." The reactions were immediate. My father's look of shock was like a punch to the gut, and Sarah's face fell into sadness. I knew I had disappointed everyone, but at the same time, a feeling of lightness began to settle over me. The weight I was carrying had lessened, and the storm that tormented me began to calm. I need to be honest, not just with you, but with myself. I can't marry someone out of obligation. "I don't want that," I said, voice stronger now. Tears started to slide down my face, but I wasn't sad. It was a relief. A huge weight had been lifted from me. My father's look changed from shock to confusion, then to sadness. "Lucas, you don't understand what you're doing. This is a mistake," he said, the pain clear in his voice. But I knew the real mistake would be to continue on that path. "I understand, Dad. I just want to be happy." "I can't live a life that isn't mine," I replied, determination rising within me. What happened next was a whirlwind of emotions. Some of the guests began to murmur, while others seemed to support my decision. What started as a moment of pain turned into a moment of liberation. I was finally taking control of my life. I left the church with my head held high, but the consequences of that decision were yet to come. I knew I would have to face my father's disapproval and Sarah's sadness, but for the first time, I felt like I was being true to myself. This freedom had a price, but it was a price I was willing to pay. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on what it really meant to be happy. Life wasn't just about following other people's expectations, but about discovering who I really was. And, most importantly, about having the courage to live this truth every day. This decision led me on a new path, and although the future was uncertain, I was ready to face it. After all, true happiness begins when you allow yourself to be who you really are. I left the church feeling a mix of relief and fear. The cold air outside hit me like a punch in the gut. I looked back, catching a glimpse of the confused and disappointed faces I left behind. My heart was still beating fast, not just from the adrenaline of the moment, but from the uncertainty of what would come next. I had made a decision that would change my life forever, but at the same time, I had no idea how to deal with the consequences. I decided I needed some time alone, away from all those eyes. I went to a nearby park and sat on a bench. The green grass around me seemed more alive than ever. The birdsong and the rustling of the leaves were like a soft melody that contrasted with the turmoil inside me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to find some clarity. But the feeling of guilt soon invaded me. I thought about Sarah, who had dreamed of that day, and how I had ruined everything. She deserved someone who was completely committed. And me? I wasn't just a reluctant groom. I had been an actor in a play I didn't want to perform. I remembered her tears and the smile that faded into despair. Her image cut me like a knife. "Are you well?" I heard a familiar voice. It was Gabriel, my best friend, who approached with a worried look. He always knew what I was going through, but I never had the courage to open my heart. Now, in that situation, I needed him more than ever. "I don't know, Gabriel. I can't stop thinking about what I did. I left everyone disappointed, especially Sarah," I confessed, my voice breaking. "You did what was right for you," he said, sitting next to me. Sometimes people don't understand that happiness doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from being true to yourself. But what if I hurt Sarah in a way that can't be turned back? What about my father? He always had high expectations for me, I shot back, feeling the pressure return. Yes, you may have hurt some people, but it's also important to remember that you don't live to please anyone. This decision may be painful now, but it could open doors to a more authentic future for both you and Sarah. As he spoke, a part of me began to understand. I was at a crossroads, and that crossroads wasn't just about me. It was about everyone involved. The truth was, if I continued to live a lie, not only would I be hurting myself, but everyone around me. But how can I fix this? How can I do this to Sarah? My voice was shaking. The idea of a conversation with her seemed scary. Maybe it's time to be honest with her, to explain everything you feel. It won't be easy, but it's a step you need to take, Gabriel suggested. And who knows, it might even open a path for the two of you to find happiness, even if it's in different directions. His words echoed in my mind. I knew I needed to confront Sarah, but the thought of seeing her again, knowing I had hurt her, paralyzed me. At the same time, a small flame of courage began to ignite within me. Over the next few days, life took its course, but for me, everything seemed different. The conversations on social media, the messages of support from friends, everything seemed superficial. I was lost in a sea of emotions. The void that previously filled my life with certainty was now a blank canvas, and I didn't know where to start designing my new future. Finally, determined to face what had to be done, I looked for Sarah. I found her in a cafe, sitting in a corner with her head down. When she saw me, her gaze was filled with sadness and anger. "Lucas," she began, voice low. "What do you want?" I want to talk." "About what happened," I said, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry about everything. I know I hurt you, but I couldn't marry you knowing that wasn't what I wanted." She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "You had no right to hurt me like that. I dreamed of this day, Lucas. I thought you were as happy as I was. I wanted to be happy for you, but I can't live a lie. The truth is that I was trapped in something that wasn't mine. The pain in his expression cut me, but I knew I needed to be honest. So what do you want now? Did you think you could just get up and leave? What about me? His voice was filled with hurt and despair. I want you to find someone who can give you the love you deserve. Someone who chooses you every day because that's what you deserve. And I need time to discover who I am. Away from all of that, he said, feeling a mixture of pain and relief. You think this is easy for me? What if I can never trust anyone again? She questioned, frustration evident. I don't know, but I hope you find happiness, even if it means being away from me, I replied, feeling the weight of responsibility in my words. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the world around us fade away, as if everything was in slow motion. I looked at her, wishing I could ease her pain, but I knew I couldn't. What I had done was irreversible. I need to go, she finally said, standing up. And I hope you find what you're looking for, Lucas. And just like that, she walked away, taking a part of my heart with her. At that moment, I realized that the consequences of my decision would go far beyond what I imagined. The path to self-discovery would be lonely and full of challenges. I was about to embark on a journey that would require not only courage, but also a deep understanding of who I truly was. There was still a lot to face. My father didn't talk to me, and conversations with friends became awkward. Everyone expected me to be sorry, but the truth was that even with the pain, there was a new kind of freedom that I had never experienced before. It was a frightening freedom, but also one that promised growth. In the following days, I began to find myself again. I read books about self-knowledge and meditated to try to understand my feelings more deeply. I knew that life would no longer be the same, but with each small achievement, each moment of reflection, I realized that I was beginning to rebuild myself. And although the road ahead was uncertain, it was a road I was finally ready to travel. The days that followed that conversation with Sarah were a whirlwind of emotions and reflections. I was in a completely new space, unfamiliar terrain that, while scary, also held a sense of possibility. Each morning I woke up and asked myself, who am I now? This question became a constant, a reminder that I had the opportunity to reinvent myself. I then decided that I needed to get away from the routine that surrounded me a little. I started walking through the city streets, observing the people around me. There was something fascinating about how each of them seemed to have their own story, their own battles. On one of these walks, I found a small art studio. The place was welcoming, with walls covered in vibrant paintings and sculptures that seemed to come to life. I walked in, and an elderly woman, with a warm smile, greeted me. "Do you like art?" she asked, observing my curious gaze. "I never thought much about it," I replied. "But I'm trying to discover new things about myself." "Sometimes art is a mirror of our soul," she said, guiding me to a table where brushes and paints were laid out. "Why don't you try it? It could be liberating." And so, I found myself holding a paintbrush for the first time. The colors mixed on my palette, and I let the emotions that were trapped inside me flow. As I painted, I realized that I was allowing myself to express everything I felt, the pain, the guilt, but also the hope. It was as if each stroke of the brush was erasing some of the sadness that had accumulated in my heart. In the following days, I started going to that studio. Painting classes became a refuge. The woman who introduced herself as Dona Clara became an unexpected friend. She always had words of encouragement, and her life stories were full of overcoming and resilience. "Art teaches us that making mistakes is part of the process," she said in one of her classes. "This is how we learn and grow." Those words reverberated inside me. I started to see my flaws in a new way. His hurting Sarah wasn't just a mistake, it was a lesson. I realized that every step I took to understand myself better was a solid foundation for a more authentic future. I didn't need to be perfect, I just needed to be real. One day, while we were talking after class, I told Dona Clara about what had happened to Sarah. "I feel like I hurt her irreparably," I confessed, looking at the floor. "Hurting someone is painful, but what matters is how you deal with it afterwards," she replied. "You can choose to dwell on the guilt or use it as a springboard to become a better person." These words became a mantra for me. I started making small changes in my life. I reconnected with friends I had left aside, those who always supported me. One of them, Lucas, invited me to a football game. I hesitated at first, but I accepted. Being on the field, feeling the adrenaline and camaraderie, was a reminder that I wasn't alone. The laughter and shared moments began to heal the wounds he carried. During one of these matches, I realized how much had changed. Playing wasn't just about winning, but about the joy of being present, of connecting with others. I felt as if each goal was a victory not only against the opponents, but against my own fears and insecurities. On another occasion, I had a deep conversation with my father. He was one of those who was most disappointed with my decision. "I just wanted you to follow the path I laid out for you," he said, frustration evident in his tone. "I understand, Dad, but I need to find my own way." "That doesn't mean I don't love you or that I don't appreciate what you've done for me," I replied, trying to be honest. "I just want to be myself." He was silent for a moment, and then, to my surprise, he nodded. "I just want you to be happy, even if it means I don't understand your choices." That moment was a milestone. I realized that true wealth was not just in meeting other people's expectations, but in building my own life with my own choices. This new wisdom accompanied me in every step I took. As I continued to explore my passion for art and reconnect with friends, I realized that overcoming was not a destination, but a constant journey. Every interaction, every conversation, every painting taught me something new. I learned to embrace the complexity of life, to accept that it was normal to have doubts and fears. Over time, the lessons I learned began to manifest themselves into more conscious decisions. I started opening myself up to new experiences, even if they were challenging. One day, I found a support group that met to discuss relationships and self-discovery. The idea of sharing my struggles with strangers made me nervous, but at the same time, there was a sense of freedom. The people there were of different ages and backgrounds, but everyone was looking to understand each other better. As I listened to their stories, I realized I was not alone in my insecurities. Each story of pain and overcoming made me feel part of something bigger. The friendships we formed in that group were unusual, but extremely valuable. Now, looking back, I can see how each step, even the most difficult ones, shaped who I am today. I'm learning to trust myself more and value my emotions. The journey of self-discovery continues, and although there are still challenges ahead, I am determined to face each one with courage and an open heart. Life is a blank canvas, and little by little, I'm painting my own picture. And with each new color I add, I feel like I'm getting closer to who I really am. With each passing day, the feeling of being on a path of discovery intensified. But at the same time, the ghosts of my past continued to haunt me, especially when I thought about Sarah. The conversations we had echoed in my mind like a mantra, reminding me of the mistake I made. Guilt seemed to always be lurking, ready to pull me back to the dark place I tried to escape. One night while I was at home, I couldn't help but relive that moment when I hurt her. The pain of his disappointment still burned in my chest. I had come so far, but the shadow of my failure seemed closer than ever. The phone rang, and when I saw Lucas' name on the screen, I hesitated for a second. He was inviting me to a party, and although the idea of socializing made me nervous, I felt like I needed a distraction. At the party, the atmosphere was vibrant, with laughter and music playing in the background. But despite the energy around me, I felt distant, like I was looking at everything from the outside. Conversations were happening, but I couldn't connect. It was then that, as I moved a little away from the crowd, I found Donna Clara in a corner, watching everything with a smile. She soon noticed my discomfort and approached me. "Sometimes, it's hard to feel part of something when you're struggling internally," she said, her voice soft. "What's bothering you, darling?" I took a deep breath and, for the first time, shared with her the pain I felt for Sarah. The anger I had towards myself, the feeling that I would never be able to forgive myself. "I'm afraid she'll never forgive me," I confessed, the words coming out in a whirlwind. "Forgiveness is a gift you can give yourself," Donna Clara replied, with the wisdom that only experience can provide. "But you have to be willing to face your fear first. What do you think you need to do to forgive yourself?" I looked around, watching people laughing and dancing. The party was a reminder of what I wanted but couldn't yet embrace. I don't know. I feel like I'm trapped. At that moment, the music changed and a slower song started playing. People started to gather together to dance. I looked at Dona Clara, and something inside me began to stir. What if I dance? What if I let myself go? She smiled, and the encouragement in her eyes gave me courage. I decided to join the dance, even though my feet were hesitant. As the music flowed, I allowed myself to feel. With each step, with each movement, I released a little of the load I was carrying. But at the same time, Sarah's image never left my mind. The music seemed to amplify the pain I felt for her, and in a moment of vulnerability, tears began to stream down my face. I wasn't just dancing, I was facing my pain. The party around me began to fade away, and all I could think about was what I had done. The music stopped abruptly, and I felt all eyes turn to me. The silence was deafening. I felt exposed and embarrassed, but in that moment, I decided I couldn't run away anymore. I hurt someone I love, I screamed, emotions spilling over. And I don't know how to forgive myself for that. The room was silent, and then Lucas, who was nearby, approached. You're not alone. We've all done something we regret. What's important is what we do next, he said, with sincerity in his eyes. Those words touched me deeply. I realized that true overcoming was not just about forgiving myself, but also about reconnecting and seeking repair. What I really wanted was the chance to talk to Sarah, to confront what had happened and, perhaps, find a path to healing. Dona Clara approached and, with an understanding look, said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. You have already taken the first step." After the party, I returned home with a heavy but determined heart. The next day I decided I needed to find Sarah. The thought of facing her made me nervous, but the thought of continuing to live with this guilt was unbearable. With my heart racing, I called her. When the familiar voice responded, my stomach twisted. "Hi, it's you," she said, hesitation evident. "What do you want?" "I just want to talk," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I need you to know that I'm sorry about what happened." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said. Rejection cut like a knife. "I understand," I replied, feeling the frustration and sadness building up again. "But I really want to apologize and understand what I did. I don't want this to stay between us." After a long silence, she finally said, "Okay. Can we meet tomorrow afternoon?" That little yes was like a ray of hope. As I prepared for the meeting, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I had to face not only what I did, but also the pain it caused someone I cared deeply about. The next day, I arrived at the cafe where I had arranged to meet Sarah. My heart was beating fast, and when I entered, I saw his distant look. As soon as we greeted each other, a weight seemed to settle between us. "I'm sorry about everything," I began, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I have no excuses for what I did, but I'm here to hear how you feel." The words came out little by little, and I saw her struggle with her emotions. "You hurt me in ways I never imagined," she replied, her voice breaking. I felt slighted, like what I felt didn't matter. The pain in his words hit me. "I didn't want this to happen," I said, guilt weighing heavily on my chest. I was confused and didn't know how to deal with my feelings. But that doesn't justify what I did. For a moment, silence took over. I could see she was struggling with her own emotions. "I don't know if I can forgive you now," she finally said, the sadness evident in her gaze. "But I appreciate you being here, acknowledging what you did." Those words were a relief and a weight at the same time. I knew I had a lot to deal with, but the truth is that it was already a step. I was willing to wait, to work to earn her trust back, and that was a start. In the days that followed, I continued to dedicate myself to my art, to the friendships I began to value again, and to the support group that had become a part of my life. Every step I took toward healing was a new color on my canvas. The journey was still long, but I finally felt like I was on the right path. I was learning that life was not about the pursuit of perfection, but about acceptance and the ability to bounce back, even when everything seemed to fall apart. And now, as I looked to the future, I knew I was ready to take on any challenge because the true richness was in the lessons I had learned and the connections I was forming. After that meeting with Sarah, my life began to take a new direction. Although the path was filled with uncertainty, there was a feeling of lightness that I hadn't felt in a long time. The courage I found to face my fears allowed me to see life in a new light. Every day was an opportunity to learn and grow. With Sarah's forgiveness still hanging in the air like a promise, I understood that healing wouldn't be instantaneous. She needed time, and I was willing to give her that space. At the same time, I realized that I couldn't be stuck in passive waiting. I had responsibilities to myself, and the desire to redeem myself drove me to move forward. I decided to dedicate myself more to my art. The studio I had set up at home became my refuge. Painting was my way of expressing everything I felt, and the colors began to speak for me. Each brushstroke was a release, a way of transforming pain into beauty. Over time, I began to participate in small exhibitions and share my work with other people. Art made me realize that true wealth was not in winning awards or recognition, but in the ability to touch the hearts of others. My interactions with Lucas and Donna Clara also changed. They became central figures in my life, offering support and advice when I needed it most. Lucas, in particular, became a closer friend. We started hanging out more, and he always reminded me of the importance of being kind to ourselves. He himself had faced challenges in his past, and sharing his story made me see that we all have our battles. Donna Clara, with her wisdom, continued to be a beacon of hope. Our conversations deepened, and she taught me the importance of living in the present. The past cannot be changed, but what you do now determines your future, she said. These words resonated with me, and I tried to apply them to every aspect of my life. As the weeks went by, I realized that the pain I felt for Sarah didn't disappear, but transformed. Instead of paralyzing me, it pushed me to be a better version of myself. I wanted Sarah to see how I was changing, but more than that, I wanted her to feel like her emotions were valid. One afternoon, while I was in a park, I received a text from Sarah. "Hi, I'd like to talk again. Can we meet?" My heart raced. It was a sign that perhaps she was ready to take a step toward reconciliation. Without hesitation, I responded affirmatively, and we agreed to meet at the same cafe. When I got there, I saw Sarah sitting, looking out the window. There was a different sparkle in his eyes, and I felt hopeful. We sat at a table, and before I could speak, she began, "I've thought about us a lot. And honestly, I'm in a different place right now." "Like this?" I asked, anticipation rising in me. I realized that even though I was hurt, I also learned a lot about myself. The pain forced me to look within and understand what I really wanted, she replied, and her words were filled with sincerity. And part of that is I want to try to start over, not just as friends, but as people who can support each other. A wave of relief washed over me. "I want that too," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I'm willing to work so we can rebuild our connection, if you're open to it." We talked for hours, sharing our experiences and fears. I heard her talk about how she felt alone and neglected, and it made me realize how much what I did affected her. At the same time, the way she talked about her new discoveries inspired me. She had become stronger, and I was genuinely happy about that. In the following months, our lives became intertwined again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of confusion and insecurity, but trust began to be established. With every conversation, with every laugh, we both learned to value what we had, not just each other, but ourselves as well. The journey of overcoming that I had started was not limited to me. Sarah was also rediscovering herself. She began to explore her passions and get involved in projects that made her happy. The support we exchanged became a solid foundation, and our friendship blossomed into a new beginning. Reflecting on all this, I realized that life is made up of ups and downs, and that failures do not define who we are, but rather how we choose to react to them. The forgiveness I sought and the transformation I experienced taught me that true wealth is not in external achievements, but in the relationships we build and the lessons we learn along the way. I became someone stronger, more resilient. The pain that once paralyzed me has now turned into fuel to move forward. And as I looked to the future, I realized that I was ready to face any challenge, because what really mattered was the journey and not the destination. The friendships, the moments of vulnerability, and the art that saved me showed me that, even in the midst of difficulties, there is always room to start over. As time passes, when I look back, I realize how my journey of overcoming shaped not only me, but also those around me. The transformation I experienced was not just a personal change. It reverberated in the relationships I built and the lives I touched. The pain that once paralyzed me now became a source of strength, a light that illuminated the path of other people who, like me, were seeking redemption and a fresh start. With each new exhibition I held, I came across new faces, each with their own stories and struggles. People often approached to talk about how art had helped them get through difficult times. I had become an example that it is possible to be reborn from the ashes. Through this, I realized that true wealth was not in winning awards or recognition, but in being a beacon of hope for others. With each conversation, I saw the impact of my experiences, and this motivated me to continue sharing my story. What I've learned along this journey is that forgiveness, both for others and ourselves, is an essential step toward healing. My relationship with Sarah has strengthened in ways I never would have imagined. Not because everything was perfect, but because we now had a deep understanding of what it is to love and be loved. We learned to deal with our failures, to laugh together, to cry, and to support each other in the small victories of everyday life. The friendship that developed between us was a living testament that second chances are possible and valuable. Lucas and Dona Clara also became pillars in my life. The connection I built with them made me realize that unexpected friendships can teach us valuable lessons. Lucas, with his light manner and practical wisdom, made me understand that life is made up of simple moments and that true happiness can be found in the little things. Dona Clara, with her stories and her worldview, helped me cultivate patience and wisdom. His words echoed in my mind, reminding me that every difficulty is an opportunity in disguise. Reflecting on everything I've been through, I realized that the lessons I learned were fundamental in shaping my new reality. I learned to be kind to myself and accept that life is a path full of ups and downs. With each challenge I face, I try to see what I can learn from it. Pain, once seen as an enemy, has become a teacher. And every mistake I made turned into an opportunity for growth and learning. Today, when I look to the future, I see a horizon full of possibilities. Art is still an essential part of my life, but I now know that true success goes beyond recognition. It's about living authentically, surrounded by people who really care and a purpose that moves me. It's about every laugh shared, every tear shed, and every moment of genuine connection I build. The peace I found within myself is a testimony to the power of the experiences we live. I am no longer the person who is afraid to open up or face their demons. I learned to embrace my vulnerability and see the beauty in imperfection. Each of us has the power to transform our pain into something meaningful. And I am proof that even in the darkest hours, there is always a path to light. My interactions with others have changed profoundly. Now, when someone shares a struggle, I feel an impulse to offer support, not just as a friend, but as someone who has been to rock bottom and come back. This empathy cultivated in me allows me to connect with people in a deeper way. The moving stories I share now are more than just narratives. They are invitations to reflect on who we are and the choices we make. Ultimately, the journey I went through taught me that life is a series of new beginnings. Every dawn brings with it the chance to rewrite our history, and I embrace this idea with my entire being. What really matters is not the final destination, but the memories we create, the lessons we learn, and the love we exchange along the way. I am at peace with my past and excited about the future, ready to face any challenge that life throws at me, always surrounded by those I love and who have supported me on my journey of transformation. Looking at everything I have experienced, I realize that the journey of overcoming is not just a narrative of achievements, but a profound learning about the fragility and strength of human beings. With each step taken, I not only grew, but I also rediscovered the value of the relationships I built along the way. The stories I shared, the moments of vulnerability, and the exchanges of affection were the true treasures I kept. I remember one day in particular when I sat with Sarah in a cafe. Looking into her eyes, I could see the reflection of our struggles. "Do you remember how impossible everything seemed?" I asked, laughing. She smiled, a smile that carried the wisdom of someone who had weathered storms. "Yes, but look where we are now. Each challenge has brought us here, together." At that moment, I realized that our friendship was a true masterpiece, forged in hardship and enriched by each resilience we shared. Lucas, always light in his words, once said, "Life is like a painting. Sometimes you need to mix colors that don't fit together at first to create something beautiful." I had a moment of epiphany upon hearing this. Every mistake I made, every pain I felt, was a color on my palette, and now, looking back, I see a vibrant picture, full of nuances that I couldn't see before. Art became a way to express not only my journey, but also the lessons I learned. Donna Clara, with her wisdom, always said, "Patience is the key to true understanding." In such a hurried world, I learned from her to slow down and observe. Each conversation with her was a deep dive into the waters of life, where she always emerged richer in knowledge and understanding. I understood that difficulties are not barriers, but rather steps that take us to a higher level of awareness and empathy. Over time, the pain that once paralyzed me turned into a source of inspiration. This became evident when I started hearing the stories of other people who were also seeking their own forms of redemption. Each story was an echo of my experiences, and I felt compelled to help. One day, at an exhibition, a young woman came up and, with tears in her eyes, said that my works had helped her face her own demons. At that moment, I realized that my art was not just a way to express my pain, but a bridge that connected lives and experiences. Today, as I look to the future, I feel renewed confidence. Every dawn brings with it the opportunity to rewrite history, and I am here to live it fully. True success, I learned, does not lie in awards or recognition, but in the ability to love and be loved, the ability to pick yourself up after a fall, and the willingness to reach out to others. It's about the memories we create and the bonds we form. Therefore, I invite each of you to reflect on your own journeys. What did you learn from your experiences? What stories do you still need to tell? Life is a constant beginning again, and each day is a new page in your narrative. Don't be afraid to open up, to share your pains and your joys. By doing this, you not only heal yourself, but you can also light the path for someone who needs to hear your story. If you have already gone through difficult times, know that it is possible to be reborn. Share your experiences in the comments, and let's create a space of support and empathy together. Together, we can transform our pain into hope and inspire those who are still fighting. And if you liked this story, like and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction is essential so that we can continue to bring more content that touches the heart and inspires change. Don't underestimate the power of your voice. She can be the light in someone's life. Let's go together in search of a brighter future where redemption is possible for all of us.